Most people have fantasies that are fleeting thoughts that intermittently come and go. For some, fantasies become obsessions, and those obsessions can lead to murder. Others, and sometimes strangers, become the objects of those obsessions, and eventually victims. Dale Harrison's obsession sent him to prison and ended the adventurous life of Jane Constantino much too soon. Jane Constantino had few fears and believed in living life to the fullest. She was a hard-working, free-willing woman who felt alive in the outdoors. After growing up on Long Island, she attended Fordham University and worked as a social worker in New York City for several years. Because she felt confined in the city, she decided to travel west to explore the hot deserts and sprawling prairies. Soon, she broadened her horizons and set her sights on Europe, where she met a man from Colorado with similar interests. After a short-lived marriage, Jane settled in Colorado, which she loved. However, her passion for traveling meant she wouldn't stay put for long. She worked hard and spent sparsely to make her traveling dreams a reality. Jane drove an old Volkswagen Bug, lived in a tiny apartment, and worked 7 days a week as a waitress. Any extra money she managed to save was used to buy the best hiking and camping gear. Jane sometimes had an eerie feeling that she would never grow old, so she made it a priority to live life to the fullest. That's exactly what she did, often putting herself in risky situations others would avoid. During Jane's travels, she regularly found herself in danger, with one wrong step leading to her demise. In 1974, the 27-year-old was struck by lightning while climbing the Grand Tetons. Despite having a serious shoulder injury and severe burns, Jane managed to rappel and hike several miles to reach the ranger station. After being airlifted off the mountain, she would be hospitalized for a month. The scar on her shoulder, which she called her badge of life, always reminded her to live free and enjoy everything life has to offer. Drowning was Jane's only legitimate fear, but she conquered that by kayaking and scuba diving. She would again almost lose her life while trying to cross a river in Alaska. The adventures would continue, with Jane climbing Mount St. Helens, Mount Baker, and Mount Rainier. She also bicycled to Mexico. Even in her 30s, Jane continued to push her body. In 1979, she bicycled from Nova Scotia to New York and collided with a truck along the way. After another hospital stay spanning several days, Jane finished the trip. In 1980, she bicycled from Denver to New York City with her brother. She flew back to Colorado and began cycling west, with Washington State being her destination. She planned to enjoy herself before cycling back to Seattle to meet friends on July the 24th. The vivacious, adventurous girl would never make it because she would encounter a monster in the Olympic National Park. Jane was likely enjoying the warmth of the sun, the cool breeze from the ocean, and the salty smell of the sea, while Dale Harrison had other things on his mind when he visited the popular national park. He wasn't there to see the tide pools, the red cedar trees, or the sea stacks. Instead, Harrison had devious intentions. He was looking for a victim to fulfill his never-ending obsession. Dale had already approached a woman who was alarmed by his behavior. He offered one woman $50 to pose for Playboy, even though he did not have a camera. She turned down his offer, and he went on his way. Nell, He set his sights on Jane Constantino, who he stalked along the rugged trail, dipping out of sight to avoid suspicion. Once they were out of sight of others, Dale struck. He viciously, swiftly, and silently knifed Jane to death. Around 3 p.m., a group of hikers turned the corner before spotting a woman who appeared to have fainted. As they got closer, it became evident that Jane's blouse was soaked in fresh blood, and the hikers were unable to find a pulse. Several law enforcement agencies responded and tried to make sense of what had happened. Jane had so many stab wounds to the chest that authorities knew she died quickly, if not immediately. After finding her ID, they set out to determine who murdered the 32-year-old victim. Witnesses mentioned the big blubbering man in a purple shirt and dark hat who gave them the creeps. Some said he had dark red stains on his purple shirt, as if he had been picking berries and wiped his hands on it. As authorities headed down the trail towards the beach, they noticed a burly man in a black cowboy hat and a purple shirt. His shirt was wet from the ocean and clear of red stains, so the man had likely washed it. After being ordered to lean against a rock, a hunting knife and a rope were removed from his possession. Although he would not answer any questions, he said his name was Dale C. Harrison. The 37-year-old from Othello, Washington, was arrested on suspicion of murder. The investigation would reveal disturbing facts about Harrison, including a 1962 conviction for sexual molestation involving 2 girls. After being released from prison, Dale lived a moderately normal life, working as a laborer and forklift operator. He was married and had 2 children. Deep down, though, he was never able to eliminate his violent sexual fantasies. Investigators spoke to Boyd Blunt, who was one of Harrison's closest friends. Boyd said Harrison had some kind of fantasy or obsession for maybe a year and a half. He didn't take Harrison seriously at first because the plan was so far out there. According to Boyd, Dale was turned on by the idea of finding a girl isolated in a forest and making her a sex slave. He also thought about beating his captive with a belt, and a knife played a part in his warped fantasy. Harrison invited Boyd to attack a woman with him, but he always refused. Before Dale Harrison's trial, he remained adamant about his innocence, claiming he watched a stranger grab his knife and stab the woman with a bicycle. When asked why he ran away, Harrison said he was afraid of being falsely accused of murder, and admitted that his criminal record was partly to blame. Harrison went on trial in November 1980 and was found guilty. His defense team wanted to bring in a motion that would mitigate his sentence because of mental illness. The judge denied the motion for a psychiatric study on December the 5th and ended the possibility that Harrison could receive early parole. Instead, he was sentenced to life in prison. Jane's family admitted that they worried about her during her travels, but murder wasn't at the top of their list of concerns. Jane Constantino's life was cut short, but she lived life to the fullest and never let fear stop her from doing what she loved so much. Federal inmate Dale Charles Harrison was released on February the 20th, 2013, and may still be living in Washington. He would be 80 years old today.